Another Day, one of the worst Bond films ever made. Just... why? Ooh. Ooh. So apologies that I'm not in my usual setting for these Bond reviews. I am at my mother's. I'm filming this during the coronavirus pandemic just so I could have it ready to go for when I'm going to upload this and have it edited and ready to go. You get the idea. So Die Another Day, yes, it is one of the worst Bond films ever made. But you're probably thinking to yourself after you read that title and saw a movie roast, you're probably like, Alex, why are you roasting a movie like Die Another Day when there's worse Bond films out there, like The Man with the Golden Gun is what a lot of people would probably say would be the easiest one to roast, because I actually really like The Man with the Golden Gun. I like a good chunk of the Moore era. I appreciate the Moore era of Bond. But if you're asking me, where it's like, why didn't you roast Diamonds Are Forever since that's your least favorite Bond film? Here's the difference between Diamonds Are Forever and Die Another Day. Diamonds Are Forever is so bad it's bad. Die Another Day, on the other hand, is so bad, it's good. This is the epitome of 2000s action movies, the early 2000s action movies, the ridiculousness of it all, the really terrible and crappy CGI messes that these movies were. This was like the triple X of the Bond franchise, except Triple X is a terrible movie that appeals to casuals. This is a Bond movie that appeals to the casual Bond fans. So I'm gonna roast this thing up. This is my newest installment in my movie roast series that I have changed from movie roast of the month to just movie roast, because I can't keep up with these things every month. So every once in a while you're gonna get a movie roast like this. This is also my next installment in my No Time to Die Bondathon leading up to that movie in November. We are gonna roast Die Another Day. I have my iPad with me for my notes. There's 8 pages on this thing. There's this app, and I literally wrote 8 pages worth of notes. So let's get started by talking about 2002's Die Another Day. And I usually put the theme song here, but I'm going to be talking about that in a minute, so I'm not even going to insert it here. So right off the bat, you know, we get the opening logos of the movie, the MGM logo, and the gun barrel's coming on. Okay, it's a James Bond movie. I'm excited. Pierce Brosnan's coming on screen. He's going to shoot. Oh my God! What was that? Did you see that? Did you see that? Blue didn't skidoo, but I mean, did you see that? Rewind that. We gotta show that again. Rewind that, please. My God, and here, oh my God, there it is again! A CGI bullet in the gun barrel. Now look, I know the gun barrel is some little thing to complain about, but a CGI bullet in the gun barrel is just too much. The first 19 times Bond shot me, I survived. This is the 20th time he shot me, and I think I died. Then we get to the opening scene in North Korea, and it's right here where I watched this movie on Netflix because I didn't have the Blu-ray with me at my mom's, but I noticed this on the Blu-ray as well, as opposed to the DVD. And I'm not sure if it was like this in the theatrical cut that was released in theaters, because I didn't see this movie in theaters. I saw this when this first came out on DVD, but the DVD, when Bond and 2 other surfers are surfing into North Korea, there's no musical score. But then on the digital edition on Netflix and the Blu-ray, a musical score is added in. It's something that's always been really off-putting for me. Are they just like George Lucasing the Bond franchise now? Do they think that this was like a major improvement on the movie? Ah, the horror. And now we have the pre-title sequence, and it's actually not a terrible pre-title sequence. This is actually kind of, to be honest with you, a hard movie to roast, because there's a good chunk of this movie that is actually fairly competent. This pre-title sequence, a couple scenes after, and then another scene that we'll talk about that's in the middle of the movie. But this pre-title sequence I actually enjoy. Yeah, there's obvious green screen effects in this pre-title sequence, especially with the hovercraft chase. There's a lot of explosions, like it looks like a Michael Bay movie. It's fun for what it is. It's competent enough where it can go unnoticed. There's one thing that always bothered me about the sequence. In this sequence, Bond is posing as Mr. Van Buren. He is posing as a diamond trader who is trading diamonds for nuclear weapons in North Korea. Once Bond is actually revealed to be a British assassin by by Colonel Moon's henchman, Zhao. Colonel Moon finds out, and that's when he explodes on Bond and shows him his nuclear weapons and his weapons of mass destruction and all the mayhem's going off. So once Bond makes a run for it, shit starts blowing up, but there's that one guy who's inspecting the diamonds and just like completely ignoring the fact that anything's happening. I've always laughed at that part because I'm like, what is that guy doing? You would think he would be the one to get the diamonds in his eyes, not Zhao. So the diamonds blow up because Bond put C4 in there. The diamonds blow up. Zhao now has expensive jewelry in his face. And that leads us to our hovercraft chase. There's a couple of instances of puns in this pre-title sequence that I don't really like. The one where Bond's like,
"Don't blow it all at once,"
in reference to the C4 being inside the briefcase full of diamonds and it blows up. Then when he jumps on a bell and Colonel Moon goes over the edge of the dam and his hovercraft goes over too and Colonel Moon is dead and Bond's hanging by the bell and he's like,
"Saved by the bell."
I hate the puns in this movie. We're going to talk more about the puns because if you thought the puns were bad in Tomorrow Never Dies and you felt that they were just becoming more haphazardly prominent in The World Is Not Enough, get a load of this shit. So now Bond gets captured by the North Korean army and he is tortured and imprisoned. And a really unique thing is that this is the first time that a storyline, that the plot of the movie has been worked into the main credits themselves. But not only is Bond getting tortured in the main credits, but my ears are getting tortured during these main credits.
I'm gonna wake up, yes and no, I'm gonna kiss some part of, I'm gonna keep this secret, I'm gonna close my body now. I guess die another day, I guess die another day, I guess die another day, I guess die another day.
Madonna's theme song, Die Another Day, is amongst the worst of the Bond songs. This is my least favorite Bond song. It's actually kind of morbidly catchy, honestly. I know the first verse of the song, that is something I am not proud of. The next moments of the movie reveal that it has been 14 months later. Bond now looks rugged. He's a man with long hair, he's got a really long beard, and Pierce Brosnan actually does a really good job of portraying Bond in this movie. That's what I'm really gonna say, especially in these scenes in North Korea where Bond just looks like he's like a homeless hobo. Pierce Brosnan portrays Bond in a way that I feel like nobody else could if they were put in these situations. Like, there's no way Roger Moore could have pulled this off. Timothy Dalton, maybe. Craig, maybe. But I feel like Pierce Brosnan is the one who would nail it. And he is getting traded for Zhao, who still has that expensive jewelry in his face. You would think after 14 months this guy would have, like, plastic surgery to get all of that removed, right? So Bond is traded, and in this scene, Michael Madsen's in this movie as, like, an American NSA director. Okay. Bond arrives in Hong Kong. Hong Kong part actually isn't too bad. Bond shaves, he goes back to being his regular Bond self, but it's not even when we get to Cuba, like the moment we get to Cuba, it's not even that. It's the moment we see Halle Berry pop out of that water wearing that bikini in what is the most obvious reference to Dr. No ever put on screen, because Die Another Day was an anniversary movie. This is the 40th anniversary of the Bond franchise, so they're just gonna reference every single movie to come before it like crazy throughout this movie. There are so many other references, and I'll talk about some of those, especially in a scene coming up, but this, once Halle Berry comes into the movie completely tanks. And Halle Berry, honestly, to me, is the worst Bond girl. Yes, Denise Richards is probably the worst actress, but the fact that Halle Berry won an Oscar and then followed up her Oscar-winning role with this movie where she is god-awful, that's worse to me, because Denise Richards never got nominated for an Oscar for anything. She never will. Not to, slight her in the slightest, but she's not a good actress. She never was before The World Is Not Enough. She wasn't in The World Is Not Enough. She's not now. Halle Berry won an Oscar. This is why I think Halle Berry is the worst casting choice for a Bond girl. And I don't even like Halle Berry as an actress. I think, and a lot of that has to play into this as well, because I think her ego is too big for her. She's too jealous of everybody. That's why I don't like Halle Berry, and I don't like Halle Berry in this movie. I don't like Jinx in this movie. She plays an NSA agent, and her and Bond hit it off right away, and I feel like it's way too quick for them to bang, because they just go at it right away. And then we get to this island in Cuba called Los Órganos, and both Bond and Jinx are there. Bond is invested. Bond thinks that there is a mole in the British government that betrayed him in North Korea. I'll talk about more of the plot in a little bit, but that's the bare bones that we have right now, and honestly, I kind of wish the movie had just rolled with that. That's basically my way of saying that this plot is completely absurd. Bond and Jinx end up on the same island, Los Órganos. Bond's trying to investigate who set him up in North Korea and who betrayed him in the British government, because he knows it's a mole. And Halle Berry is there, and this is where we get our first hints at the larger plot that is coming. She meets with this doctor who is talking about gene replacement therapy and like operations, and you're kind of wondering, you're like, well, what does this have to do with anything? Like, why is she speaking to this doctor? But then Bond finds a secret room, and there is Zhao, who is somehow now bald, and he's under this machine that I call the gene machine. And instantly you kind of know something's up with that. We have one of the worst action sequences in a Brosnan film. I don't even know what happens in this movie. There's like this big giant bullet looking thing that looks like the bullet bill from Mario, and it just blows a hole into the wall, and I gotta say, Jinx has the aim of a stormtrooper. There is no way I could buy her as an NSA agent. She is terrible. Look at how many times she tries to hit Zhao. How do you miss, lady? How do you miss? You hit his henchman. Apparently you have no problem hitting the guy with the machine gun who's trying to get Zhao onto the helicopter, but you can't hit Zhao. I get he's ducking in some parts, so that's explainable. He's ducking, he's dodging, but other times where it's like when you're running up that, when she's running up that hill and she's shooting at him, how is she missing? I don't get it. How is she have as bad of an aim as a stormtrooper? Even worse than a stormtrooper. If you haven't already figured it out by now, I feel like the character of Jinx is a total Jinx on this movie. And it's here in this action scene when Bond confronts Zhao. Right before all this happens with Jinx, Bond confronts Zhao, and we get our instances of how stylized and cool and awesome this movie's supposed to be with that slow-mo. I've said my piece against slow-mo in the past. If you look at my past reviews for movies that feature slow-mo, I'm not a huge fan of slow-mo. Mostly because Zack Snyder, he didn't invent it, but he made it very popular with 300, and I just feel like it's a tired and true thing at this point. Die Another Day did it just to be stylistic. They did it just for the sake of thinking, oh hey, this is cool, how do we get casual Bond fans to come out and see a Bond movie? Slow-mo action. Boom! That's what we're talking about. Slow-mo, fantastical coolness, because this is the guy you want to eat your lunch with at the cafeteria. That, anybody who could do that, make it slow-mo. That's what matters. Zhao escapes, and Bond inspects this diamond that he found from a contact in Cuba, and he inspects them and he sees this little marking on them, and this leads us to our next character. Bond is going home to London, and we are introduced to Gustav Graves, played by Toby Stephens. Toby Stephens is great. I love Toby Stephens is great. He runs with what he's given. I'll talk more about Gustav Graves in a little bit, but it's kind of weird that this dude just comes out of nowhere. Like, who is this guy? Apparently he found this mine full of diamonds and he cashed them in and became a rich billionaire playboy. Rich billionaire playboy. I wonder who that could be. We are introduced to Gustav Graves and his publicist Miranda Frost, who is played by Rosamund Pike, who was really good in the movie too. This was actually her, I believe this was her first theatrical movie, and she had to miss a day of filming because she had to go to her graduation ceremony at Oxford, so that's a little cool tidbit. And quite soon after, we get to one of my favorite parts of this movie, one of my favorite sequences in the James Bond film franchise, and that is Bond and Gustav Graves sword fighting. Before that, though, this scene is almost inexplicably ruined by Madonna herself, who definitely did not need to cameo, and it's definitely inevitable that it said in her contract that if she did the Bond song that she would have to make a cameo. That was probably her ultimatum, and the producers were stupid enough to be like, okay, go ahead, where do you want to be? And she's like, I want to be in the coolest scene of the movie, put me in the sword fight, or right before the sword fight. She plays Verity, and she's like, I don't like cuss, I like, get off the screen, Madonna, you can't act, Guy Ritchie proved that was swept away, just go away, please, just go away, your theme song sucked, I don't want to see you, or think about you, or that song for the rest of the movie. But this sword fight, this Pierce Brosnan, Toby Stephens, like the acting in general and like the pre-title sequence are like the only things of merit for this movie. Why is the sword fight so good? Because it's never been done in a Bond film before. When I see new things in a Bond film, that immediately excites me. It's not playing into expectations. It's something that goes completely unexpected. When it pops up, you're just like, holy shit, this is fucking cool. I just wish that the sword fight was a bit longer. I always liked how they used different types of swords. I always thought that was really fun. Bond gets the shit kicked out of him. It's the one time in the movie he kind of actually is bleeding. And unfortunately, the best scene in the movie just kind of goes away like that. Even though it's awesome, it's a bit too short, and we get to one of the most cringy scenes in the movie, and John Cleese as Q, who I refuse to refer to as Q. That dude is R. That dude is Q. That dude is Q. This guy is not Q. This is R. This dude tries to do his best Desmond Llewellyn impersonation, and it's painful. Not only that, but this entire scene is painful, because it's another reminder that we're in an anniversary movie, and oh my god, look at that, it's all of the gadgets from the previous 19 movies. Oh my god, all the fan nerds are gonna go crazy. Why do I sound like Jar Jar Binks right now? I don't know what the hell I just did. Oh, but yeah, we get references to the other movies. Bond inspecting some gadgets, like the shoe with the knife that Rosa Klebb Warren from Russia would love, and then like the jetpack from Thunderball, amongst other things. And then when R, not Q, R, gives Bond his new watch, he's like,
now, new watch, this will be your 20th, I believe.
we're going to reference how many missions Bond has had now? For Christ's sakes, movie. And if all the references to the gadgets wasn't painful enough, we get introduction to two new gadgets in this sequence. Virtual reality sunglasses, which Bond does a simulation of him killing terrorists in MI6 and one of them holding M at gunpoint and him shooting M and then the terrorists and Q walking into frame and the sunglasses just like removing like their like virtual reality windshield, that's what I call it, and they just go and Bond can see. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? Like, are we really doing this in a Bond movie? Virtual reality sunglasses in a Bond movie. And then our next gadget is an invisible car. And of course they have to throw in Bond going, "You must be joking," to R when he unveils the invisible car. Why does Bond have an invisible car? Why does Bond have virtual reality sunglasses?
Aston Martin call it the Vanquish, we call it the Vanish.
Oh, very good.
Look, this series jumped the shark when Bond broke orbit and went to space in Moonraker. I can tolerate Bond going to space in Moonraker now. It doesn't look so bad in hindsight. Virtual reality sunglasses and invisible cars.
Time to draw the line.
That's another pun later on in the movie. Ugh. So after that sword fight, Gustav Graves invites Bond to Iceland because Gustav Graves is a businessman and he's got this demonstration of this new project he's been working on. I mean, come on, Bond. Like, That's the most obvious thing, that this dude is up to no good, but you're too dumb to even realize it. So Bond goes to Iceland, and Jinx also goes to Iceland. She doesn't go with Bond, but she meets Bond there, and if it doesn't sound like the movie is as absurd as I'm making it out to be, this is where the movie just goes completely absurd. It gets silly and ridiculous, and a lot of this now is where the movie just becomes laughable. Because here's where it honestly starts. A good chunk of this movie takes place in Iceland, a place that they say that is just made to look like all ice, because it's Iceland. And so Bond somehow gets his car, that invisible car, to Iceland, drives to this ice palace that is just a people igloo. It's just an igloo made of ice that has an ice road, an ice parking lot. It's made of ice. Doors are made of ice. The bar is made of ice. Glasses, like beer glasses, martini glasses, alcoholic glasses, are made of ice. The floor is made of ice. This doesn't sound architecturally sound. This is not the best idea an architect has ever had. This is the worst idea the Bond series has ever had. One of the worst ideas, at least. This has just proven to me how fantastical this movie is getting. This is now Austin Powers territory. We are no longer in a Bond film. The virtual reality sunglasses and the invisible car prove that to us. This is just further proof that they just don't care about characters, story, directing, special effects, and the practicality of special effects in a Bond movie, because there's a scene later on that I'll get into that I think is completely fucking terrible. There's no regard for how absurd production design or storyboarding might be, or concept art might be. They're just throwing everything at the table. It's like somebody had all of these ideas and everybody was just throwing a dart, and whatever landed they put in the movie. That's exactly what this movie is. It is so fantastical and so absurd. This people igloo makes no sense. And to make matters even worse, here is where we get our next hints of the next part of the plot. When Zhao and Gustav Graves meet, you automatically know that they're in league because Graves has that gene machine that was at that Cuban clinic that Zhao had. And so apparently Gustav Graves, who is totally white, is not Asian at all. Apparently, that Colonel Moon from the pre-title sequence is actually Gustav Graves, but he had gene replacement therapy to make himself look like Gustav Graves and model himself after Bond, a man he hates. Oh my god, this is the most absurd plot in a Bond film. Oh my god, before I know, I like, this movie just needed cloning. That's all this movie needed, was cloning. Gene replacement therapy and clones. How crazy would that have been? This twist is such an obvious rip-off of Face Off, and it's not like this wasn't hinted at before. We should have seen this coming. It's not shocking at all. Honestly, it's so stupid. It's so absurd. I cannot believe this made its way into a Bond movie. Come on, like, seriously, so... I'm still laughing about it. I don't know how that's possible. How does that man go to being that man so easily? In 14 months, you would think that would take, like, such a long time, too. And then later on, we are introduced to the next part of the plot. So you remember how I said Gustav Graves invited Bond to Iceland because Graves was giving a demonstration to media outlets and the public about a project he was working on? Well, this project just happens to be some space satellite named Icarus. I think you know where I'm going with this. But he gives this demonstration, and his whole spiel is that this space satellite will reflect the solar rays of the sun down to countries that get very minimal to no sunlight, and it will help them produce their crops faster, when in reality, okay, I'm going to try and do a summary of the plot of this movie while giving you new information as to what Icarus does. Disregard what I just said about Icarus. So, the plot of this movie involves Bond posing as a diamond trader to trade diamonds for nuclear weapons. He gets betrayed by somebody in the British government who rats him out to the North Korean army, and Colonel Moon finds out from his henchman Zhao. Bond is then imprisoned and tortured for 14 months. He then goes on a globe-trotting adventure to find out who this mole in the British government is, stumbles upon this billionaire playboy named Gustav Graves, who comes out of nowhere, so Bond doesn't even have to investigate him. Gustav Graves invites him to this ice palace, and we find out Graves is actually in league with Zhao, and that Graves is really Colonel Moon, and had gene replacement therapy to make himself look like Gustav Graves, which I'm still laughing at that. It's so stupid. And now he says he has this space weapon named Icarus that will reflect solar rays of the sun down to countries that don't have any sunlight so that their crops can grow, when in reality, that's just an excuse he's using because he really wants to use Icarus to cut a highway through the 38th parallel. He wants to blow up the 38th parallel with this space weapon so that it creates a highway for North Korean troops to invade South Korea and start a war. I don't know how many minutes that just took me to explain. I feel like that was a very long-winded explanation, but like that's the best way of describing this plot. That's how so goddamn stupid it is. It's so long-winded. There's so many moving parts with this plot, and it's just so absurd. And then Bond goes to rescue Jinx, who is captured by Mr. Kill, who is awesome, and Zhao, who thinks he's awesome because he's got expensive jewelry in his face, and is really not that awesome. And Halle Berry mumbles terrible dialogue. Ugh.
Who sent you?
Your mama. And she told me to tell you she's really disappointed in you.
Another reason I don't like her in this movie, and she's strapped to this thing, and there's a bunch of lasers, of course, because we have to have this reference to Goldfinger, where this laser is gonna, like, cut her the same way this laser was almost gonna cut Bond and Goldfinger. So Bond comes, and he fights Mr. Kill, and there's just a bunch of giant lasers in this scene. Like, this belongs in a Star Wars movie. There's no reason that we need to have this many CGI shots of lasers. So Bond rescues Jinx, and this fight between him and Mr. Kill is actually kind of funny. It's just these lasers, like, they have to maneuver around these lasers, and you would think Bond would continually get hit by these lasers. He only gets hit once. And then the way Mr. Kill dies is amazing, because Bond moves his head ever so slightly as to not get hit by the laser, but like there's so much room that he didn't even have to move his head to the slightest. Like, Mr. Kill just gets the laser through the back of his head, it goes through his mouth and onto like the side of Bond's shoulder, just like right above Bond's shoulder, like right here. Like, it's like right here where the edge of my finger is, and Bond moves his head to the right like this. I'm like, you didn't even have to move your head. Like, what the hell's the point? So Bond and Jinx then team up, and something I've really noticed about Die Another Day is that, how does Jinx know Bond's a British spy? Bond never brought this up to her. He lied to her and said that he was an ornithologist, but I don't recall him ever telling her that he worked for the British government, that he was a spy.
Oh, no.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
So when she's like, hello, we're on the same side, there's a discrepancy there where I'm just like, how do you know he's a spy? Like, I guess movie logic? I don't know, she must have figured it out somehow. If they're both there, then he's got to be a British. How does she know that he's a British agent? How does she know that he's a spy? Just because he's there doesn't make him a spy. Are all those people with the super duper sunglasses when Icarus was being demonstrated, are they spies as well? I don't see her logic here, which is why I hate the character of Jinx. She makes no sense. So Bond and Jinx decide to team up, and it's here that Bond learns that this gene machine was brought by another Korean and not Zhao. So that's when he pieces together that Gustav Graves is actually Colonel Moon. So Bond confronts him, and Graves, of course, is just like, well, Bond, you finally saw through my ruse. You're a total idiot. Because Bond is a total idiot in this movie. And in the least shocking plot twist of all time, Miranda Frost is revealed to be that mole that betrayed Bond and is actually in league with Gustav Graves. Like we didn't see that coming from a mile away. Gustav Graves pops up out of nowhere. Miranda Frost pops up out of nowhere. She's his publicist. She's an MI6 agent who is assigned to Gustav Graves by M, and she's turned up little to nothing on Graves. Like, that's just cause for caution right there. You should probably investigate her while you can.
She was right under your nose.
But of course, no action is taken, and the clues are just, they're so on the nose, where it's just like, obviously, it's as non-shocking as that reveal in The Rise of Skywalker that Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter, which I like The Rise of Skywalker, just gonna say that, but that's one of my issues I have with that movie, is that it's like, you have power, you have his power, you're his granddaughter. I'm like, oh god. That was terrible dialogue in that movie, but it's the exact same thing. It's the least shocking plot twist of all time. We saw it coming miles away, just like how we saw Rey being a Palpatine coming miles away. And of course, we have some more puns. Bond gets into that racing vehicle, I don't know what you call that thing, but it's the one on ice, and of course, like, Graves is gonna use this space weapon to, like, melt the polar ice caps and try and kill Bond with it. So what does he say?
Time to draw the line.
Oh my god, I hate this movie and its puns. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any other uses of the puns. I couldn't find clips of them. So it's gonna sound or look like there's not as many puns in this movie, but just watch the movie. The puns will get on your nerves quick. And this leads me to one of the worst, if not the worst, sequence in any Bond film. Excuse me, I gotta go vomit. Okay, that sequence, just no. 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 Not in a Bond film. Not in a Bond film. It's CGI, it's a mess, and it's clear that it's an early 2000s movie. Because, hey, look, we're making Bond look cool. If you don't like this movie, you can't hang out at the cool kids table because you have to like kite surfing and awful CGI when it's not at its height. It's definitely early 2000s. Perfect for the casual fans. This scene also just proves that in this movie, Bond is a superhero. He's no longer a human being. He's a superhero. He can survive all of this dangerous stuff without a single goddamn scratch on him and walk away like it's nothing. He's a superhero. He is no longer a human being. This dude has like supernatural powers. I'm calling it now. I would not be surprised if this movie eventually put a spin on the Bond character by making him some like supernatural entity. It should have happened. They should have just went for full-blown absurdity. This movie is just so, it's so absurd. I hate it. So Bond escapes that debacle, and his invisible car tips off Zhao as to Bond's location. Bond gets in his car and drives across this giant ice ocean, and Zhao gets in his car. But here's the thing. I understand Bond having a tricked out car. Bond's a secret agent. He has all these gadgets on his car. The invisible car is just stupid. But I mean, like, the other gadgets, like ejector seat makes sense. Like, machine gun turrets make sense. Zhao having all of that? Where did that come from? Again, this is just appealing to the masses.
Warning, adaptive camouflage failure.
The casuals need something to watch. They need something that looks cool and would look awesome. I don't understand how Zhao has such a tricked out car. This sequence feels very toyetic in that sense. It's just like, oh, hey, here, you want an invisible Aston Martin? There you go. But wait, what about Zhao's car that randomly has a machine gun turret on it? Here you go, another action figure for your big-ass collection. That's something I never understood. It's always bothered me about this sequence. I just called him Zod. I'm keeping that in. I just called Zhao Zod. But why does Zhao have a tricked out car? I don't get it. With all that being said though, as dumb and absurd as this car chase is for logistical reasons, for filmmaking reasons, for the sheer stupidity of it all, I kind of enjoy the sequence because it's so stupid. I have a lot of fun with the sequence, like when Bond's car flips upside down, and it's just smooth sailing on the ice. It's still moving on the ice, and Zhao just shoots a rocket from his headlights, and it goes right through Bond's windshield, and he hits the ejector seat, so the car flips like as the rocket's going through it, or it might even be like trying to hit Bond, and like Bond uses the ejector seat so that it goes like right under his car. It's stuff like that where I'm like, this doesn't belong in a Bond movie, but this is the type of absurdity and stupidity that I love. Like, this is like 90s action movie stuff. This is the stuff that I wish was in this movie more. Like, the first half of the movie just should have had all of this. And so you think the movie's over when Bond kills Zhao with an ice chandelier. They drive inside the people igloo, and Bond shoots a chandelier because Zhao drives his car into the floor, and the floor just gives out into water. So he's swimming about, Bond shoots a chandelier, and the chandelier comes crashing down on Zhao, and he gets stabbed by the chandelier, so we don't have to look at his expensive jewelry anymore. But I mean, that's expensive ice. That's just property damage, and that's just ice abuse. But unfortunately, we still have another half hour to go, and for most of the movie, there's a sudden character shift here with M, because for most of the movie, she's not in agreement with Bond. She actually rescinds his license to kill. And then all of a sudden, when Bond and Jinx team up, right before they go into Gustav's like big plane, cargo plane, there's this meeting between Bond and Falco, who's Michael Madsen, so he comes back again, and like, she's just giving Bond all the praise. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because you hated the guy at the beginning. What made you change your mind, lady? Look, I love Judi Dench as M, but some of the writing in this movie for M is not very good. And Michael Madsen's he's just a distraction in this movie. He doesn't have to be in this movie. You could have cast anybody in the role of Falco, and I wouldn't have even noticed. It wouldn't have been as distracting. Michael Madsen is just super distracting. It's like, what are you doing in a Bond film, man? So Bond and Jinx infiltrate Gustav's cargo plane. And Gustav Graves is dressed like this like Power Rangers villain. He's got this suit that emits electricity. Like you could see the electricity beams coming out of it. It's pretty fucking hilarious, honestly. It's like something out of Star Wars. It's like if the Emperor wasn't so messed up and was just wearing an entire suit that could emit electricity instead of using force lightning out of his fingertips. That's exactly what the suit looks like. He's got those dumbass goggles. I'm pretty sure those are virtual reality sunglasses too. It just looks so stupid. He meets with his father. He tries to convince his father that he is actually his son, Colonel Moon, and his father doesn't believe him. So what's the most logical thing that Gustav Graves does? He shoots him and kills him. Because, oh hey, you can't accept me. So there's that. There's also some really terrible dialogue in these upcoming scenes. Jinx and Miranda fight. And it's weird because Miranda just comes in and finds Jinx and she's in that outfit, which, hey, I ain't complaining. It looks pretty damn good on her. But I'm trying not to be a pervert right here, so I'm also going to say, where did that outfit come from? And so they fight and there's more slow motion and Jinx is able to like do somersaults over Miranda and like cartwheels. They're trying to make Halle Berry look cool and sexy because she has to be sexy if she takes her clothes off. So, like, they needed to give her all these cool things, and I bet you that was Halle Berry's insistence to make her character more cool, but at the same time, I don't care about Jinx, so it's not cool, it's really stupid, and these two have a mini sword fight that's nowhere near as good as the sword fight from earlier in the film, and Miranda just says this stupid line, and Jinx says this stupid line after she says that.
Ha! I can read your every move.
Read this, bitch.
Just to make matters worse, Bond fights Gustav Graves, and Graves, like, electrocutes Bond. You would think Bond would be, like, paralyzed or dead. And Graves says this stupid line.
Oh, look! Parachutes for the both of us! Whoops! Not anymore! You see, Mr. Bond, you can't kill my dreams. But my dreams can kill you. Time to face destiny. Time to face gravity!
So Gustav Graves gets sucked out of the plane the same way Goldfinger gets sucked out of the plane and dies in the same way Goldfinger dies. Because this is an anniversary movie, we gotta reference all the other movies. My god, just end, just end, just end, just end. Okay, the big finale happens, Bond and Jinx are going down together. It's the end of the movie, thank God. Oh shit. Another scene. This scene is just catering to the Moneypenny and Bond shippers. Moneypenny has the virtual reality sunglasses on, and she has a virtual reality simulation of her like getting a little hot and steamy with the Bond. And then R, because he's not Q, he's R, walks in on her, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, here's your glasses, I was just testing it out. I'm like, oh my god. Moneypenny finally got her first hot kiss after 40 years, but it's the stupidest thing ever. Moneypenny, I don't even think, it was more of a flirtatious relationship between Bond. Like, Bond was oblivious. There's no way that that would ever happen in a Bond film. What we just witnessed. It's so goddamn stupid and just hammers home more of this movie. Oh, thank God that's the end. Oh, fuck. Another scene. So Bond and Jinx, of course, have to make out and stuff like that, and the movie fades out to black. Is it finally over? Oh, thank God, it's over. But just to make matters worse, not again. No, not again. No. That's it. I'm turning it off right now. So that's my roast of Die Another Day. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. That's my next installment in my No Time to Die Bondathon series. I'm gonna give Die Another Day D. This was torture. I'll say that. It was torture to talk about this movie, but it was also therapeutic at the same time. One of the lesser Bond films for sure. But am I going to lie when I say there's some parts that are really absurd and stupid that entertain me, like that dumb car chase? No, then there's some merit to this movie. Pierce Brosnan's really good. The first 40 minutes or so are competent, and that sword fight in the middle is great. But the rest of the movie is nowhere near as good as any of that, and it's just Austin Powers territory with this movie. It is absurd, it is stupid, it is silly, it's ridiculous, it is way too fantastical, it is the exact definition of an early 2000s action movie, and it appeals to casual fans of like movies and action movies and the Bond series in general. But I always have a fun time watching it because I could just laugh at its stupidity. Because it's so bad it's good. And I was actually thinking about this. If you take out all of that gene replacement therapy plot and that whole Icarus cutting through the 38th parallel plot, and you just actually focused on the plot line of, oh hey, there's a mole in the British government that betrayed Bond in North Korea, and now Bond has to go and track that mole down. While unoriginal and cliche, I think that this movie should have just probably stuck to that. I think that that would have been a more compelling Bond film, but it is what it is. They learned their lesson with this movie, thank God, because I cannot wait to talk about my next installment, Casino Royale, the first Daniel Craig movie and the first Bond movie I ever saw in theaters. I'll get into a lot more of that when I review Casino Royale. I'm going to be having a special guest on that review, so stay tuned for that very soon. You guys are the best. I will leave my link to my website in the description below. All my social media accounts are there. I'll see you at the movies somewhere.